Hi everyone, I'm Nicole, a library assistant at the Gettysburg Library, and the Native American tale that I will be reading today is entitled Singing Waters and the Medicine Well, and that has been taken from the Treasury of American Indian Tales. Singing Water's work as an Indian maiden in the Teton Dakota tribe was typical of the work of Indian maidens across the continent. Each year she would make new clothing for her family, and each day of the year she would cook and do the many little things that were the duty of a good Indian squaw. The work was hard, but Singing Waters did not mind, for she loved her husband and her children and was very happy and proud to be able to help them. When she found that she had some free time, Singing Waters would join the other women of the tribe to boast about her husband's great deeds on the hunt and in battle. This was a favorite pastime of all the squaws. They would spend many hours throughout the years to talk over and over again about the adventures of their braves. Each time, they would repeat the stories with even more enthusiasm. One day, all the tribe's braves had left to hunt down a great buffalo herd for food and clothing for the tribe. Singing Waters was seated in front of her teepee, teaching her two daughters how to cook, when the morning sky grew suddenly very black. A great quiet fell upon the village. Even the dogs, that seemed to spend their day barking for no good reason, were silent. Singing Waters heard only the wind as it whispered through the village. Then from a distance there came a rumble that seemed to come slowly nearer and nearer to the village. Singing Waters realized quickly that a dust storm was heading for her village. The other squaws had heard it too, and were rushing to gather their children into their teepees and bind the skins across the entrances as tightly as they could. The dogs whimpered and scattered for whatever shelter they could find. The village did not have to wait long, for the winds were soon lashing against the teepees, straining their fastenings, and the dust was whipping through the village like a flood tide rushing over the rocks on the seashore. The dust reached into every opening in Singing Waters' teepee. It wasn't long before a fine coating of it covered everything and everyone inside. Her two daughters huddled close to her, crying slightly because of their fear of the storm. But soon the wind blew out of the village, and the last dust clouds settled to the ground. One by one the flaps of the teepees swung back. Mothers, children, and old men began to come out. They found that many things, left outside in the haste of escaping from the storm, were covered with coats of light brown dust. Everyone began cleaning up the village and sweeping away the dust which had piled up against the sides of the teepees. While this was happening, a young boy named Fat Buffalo, because he was short and very fat, came running through the village, crying that his mother was lost. Singing Waters halted him and shook him a little to make him stop his screaming. When he had quieted, she was able to learn that Brown Fawn, the boy's mother, had left the teepee early that morning to seek fresh water. She had been gone only a little while when the storm struck. Now she was not back in the teepee, and Fat Buffalo was frightened. Singing Waters was worried, but did not tell Fat Buffalo. She knew that an Indian woman out in such a storm might easily fall under the stinging pelting of the sand, only to be smothered by it. She might never be found unless, years later, new storm should blow away the dust and reveal the dry bones of a skeleton and a few bits of her clothing. Though Singing Waters felt panic in her heart, she quieted herself and spoke calmly to Fat Buffalo. "Go back to your teepee, Fat Buffalo, and wait. Your mother probably found shelter from the storm. Now that it has stopped, she will be home soon. If it will make you feel better, I will go and look for her. Return now to your teepee. I wouldn't be surprised if your mother were there already." How Singing Waters hoped that Brown Fawn was back in the village by now. It would be almost an impossible task to find her here on the plains if she were dead or even hurt. First, Singing Waters would not know in which direction to start. The water hole that she and most of the tribe used was to the south, but there were many water holes in many directions from the village. Singing Waters decided that she should go to Brown Fawn's teepee and find out if anyone else in the family knew in which direction she had gone. After warning her 2 daughters to stay close to home, saying that she would be back shortly, Singing Waters ran swiftly through the village. Reaching Brown Fawn's teepee, she opened the tent flap and stepped inside. As her eyes grew used to the darkness, she saw a fat buffalo kneeling in the far corner of the teepee, crying. Approaching slowly, Singing Waters saw that there was someone else in the teepee and that fat buffalo was kneeling next to that person. As she drew near, her heart was happy, for she thought that Brown Fawn had returned and was comforting fat buffalo. She was about to turn and leave, when she suddenly realized that this woman was not Brown Fawn, but fat buffalo's grandmother, Little Otter, who held the boy's head on her lap. Singing Waters approached quietly and spoke softly to Little Otter. "Has Brown Fawn returned yet with the water?" she asked, with slight hope in her voice. "No," said Little Otter, "and it was because of me that she went in search of water. We have some water here in the teepee, but I have not been feeling well, and Brown Fawn thought that herbs brewed in fresh spring water from the rocks on the nearby hills might make a tea which would help my sickness to leave." "But," said Singing Waters, "the hills where the streams flow are many miles from here. If Brown Fawn left when the sun rose, then she might just have reached the spring when the storm came. She is probably on her way back to the village right now." The sad news about Brown Fawn soon reached everyone in the village. Many anxious eyes watched the trail that led from the hills. Each person hoped to be the first to catch sight of Brown Fawn and bring happiness to Little Otter and Fat Buffalo. Later that afternoon, Singing Waters came once again to Brown Fawn's teepee. She talked quietly with Little Otter, and then hurried back to her teepee and placed a warm buffalo jacket across her shoulders. Then, taking her 2 little daughters, she went to her sister's teepee and asked if she might leave the children there for supper while she went in search of Brown Fawn. Her sister looked at her and asked, "Why do you not wait until the warriors return? They should be coming any time now, and they could go in search of Brown Fawn. You have 2 little children to think about." "Yes," said Singing Waters, "I have 2 little children to think about, but we do not know when the warriors will be back. If the hunting is good, they may not return for another week. Brown Fawn may not be too far from the village." Nothing Singing Waters' sister could say to her would change her mind. So she set out from the village toward the mountain spring, known to the members of her tribe as the Medicine Well. It was getting late in the day, and Singing Waters knew that she must hurry if she were to reach the Medicine Well before sunset. She knew the trail well. As a girl, she had followed it many times, for there always seemed to be some sickness in her village. Singing Waters finally came in sight of the ridge beyond which lay the Medicine Well, still having found no trace of Brown Fawn. Tirelessly she trotted on until she had climbed the ridge and had worked her way to the place from which the water flowed into the Medicine Well. As Singing Waters approached the Medicine Well, she called Brown Fawn's name softly, but heard no answer. Then she began to call more loudly. Suddenly, from far ahead, she heard a voice answer. Now Singing Waters began to run, for she feared that Brown Fawn was in serious trouble. She ran until she reached the side of the Medicine Well, but still did not see Brown Fawn. Then she called again, and the voice answered, "Help me! I am over here." The voice was coming from beyond the Medicine Well. Singing Waters ran on further. Then she stopped and called again. The voice replied again, and Singing Waters knew that she was closer. Brown Fawn's voice seemed to be coming from just behind a rise ahead of her. She ran swiftly to the top of the rise, and there she found a water bag. As she looked down the side of the rise through the gathering gloom, she could make out Brown Fawn's figure down the side of the hill. She sat, leaning against a boulder, and she called out to Singing Waters to help her. Singing Waters slipped and slid in her haste down the side of the hill, until she was at the side of Brown Fawn. Brown Fawn was so glad to see her that she cried, great tears rolling down her now pale cheeks. Singing Waters could see that Brown Fawn had twisted her ankle. As she began to lift the injured woman, Singing Waters asked her how she had hurt herself, and how she had escaped the storm. Brown Fawn told how she had reached the medicine well just as the dust storm had broken. After filling her water bag, she had turned quickly to go, and had fallen, twisting her ankle. When she was once again able to rise, putting her weight on her other ankle, she found that she had lost all sense of direction and had started hobbling in the wrong direction. "Why didn't you lie down among the rocks until the storm passed?" Singing Waters asked. "I wanted to rest," Brown Fawn replied, "but then I would think of my mother and son, and I felt I must return to her and Fat Buffalo immediately with the medicine water." "But," said Singing Waters, "you are safe now. Now we must return to the village while there is still a little light, or we may become lost out here on the prairie far away from the warmth of our teepees. Come, Brown Fawn, lean upon me and I will help you walk." So Brown Fawn placed her arm across Singing Waters' shoulders. Together they slowly started back to the village. It was dark by the time they had reached the fringe of the village, but bright fires had been lighted to show them the way home. There was much rejoicing as Singing Waters entered the village, half carrying Brown Fawn. Gentle hands grasped Brown Fawn and placed her gently upon the buffalo robe in her teepee. Soon her eyelids flickered, and she opened them wide, looking around for a face which meant much to her. But Singing Waters had returned to her own home and her children, and was recounting for them the adventure she had just had. They smiled, knowing that their mother was a woman of great courage. They were very proud.